Good evening, I am Scott Sackett. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you enjoyed this video, please take a second to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. My last video, I reviewed this book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. And in the video, I promised that I was going to do a series of, I would say, lessons. I felt like one of the shortcomings of this book was that it had a lot of good examples in there, but maybe they didn't explain it very well. And so I'm going to go through the book. I'm not going to go through the whole book tonight. I'm going to keep them short. I don't know exactly how many I'm going to go through. It kind of depends on how it goes. I don't want the videos to be super long, but I'm going to go through it and kind of explain some of the stuff and maybe give you some exercises. There's not a lot of exercise in these books. And if you don't know the history of this book, I would encourage you to go back and watch my previous video where I review it. A lot of people have commented that that it's outdated, and they've told me when I talked to them and recommend this book, they've said, well, you know, it's kind of outdated material because the drawing style is kind of what maybe old-fashioned, if you want to think of it that way. I can't disagree that it was written in the 70s and all the art examples are from the 70s, but the book does have some very good advice for anyone that wants to learn to draw comics. And so I'm going to go through it and I'll talk about it, and you know, we'll see how it goes. If you have any questions, please comment below. I'm going to try and go through it fairly quick. I'm going to cover a couple chapters tonight because I feel that while they're important, none of these chapters necessarily merit an entire video on their own. But I'm going to go through it in sequential order. Okay, so the first chapter is called Tools and the Talk of the Trade. Now, every drawing book that you've ever looked at, if you've ever looked at any has this chapter or this page, something like this, and it'll tell you now this one's very vague. Some of them go down to brand names and stuff, and this is valid, but I think for our purposes, I would say ignore this spread. If you have this book, don't worry about this. And I'm going to tell you, what you need is you need a pencil. You know, the stuff we're going to go through. I'm not going to talk about inking, so you don't need any inking tools. And I would say just a yellow pencil is fine. I have a Dixon Ticonderoga. That's what I'm going to use. It's cheap. You can get them anywhere. I like these. The lead seems to be fairly consistent for a cheap pencil. This is probably the best of your standard yellow pencils you can get. If you want to get something a little bit nicer, this is the brand that I recommend, is the Staedtler Mars Lumograph. I've tried them all. These seem to be the best in terms of price and in terms of consistency of lead. I've had the most luck with them, and I think they have the most consistent lead in terms of if you use the different grades. The different grades are consistent from batch to batch. I'm not going to use one of these just for this example, but if you want to buy a drawing pencil, this is the one I would recommend. Now, you can buy a lead holder like this. There's a blue one, and I don't see one over here, but there's a blue one that's made by Staedtler Mars that you can get at any office supply store, and this is what they call clutch pencil. It's got a button on the end. Push the button and the lead comes out. You don't need this. There's literally no advantage to using this over this at this point, certainly. Now, when you're drawing comics, you may want to switch to this because it's a little more economical. You can buy one of these and a bunch of refill leads cheaper than you can buy a bunch of these, or certainly a bunch of these. These are about $2 a piece. You can get refill leads for this for maybe $1, 75 cents a piece. So this is certainly the more economical way to go. There are advantages and disadvantages to using these. I like to use these in my sketchbook because it's got a clip on it, so I can put it in my bag. You know, I don't have to worry about this. You do have to sharpen them, and so if you get one of those, you'll have to get something like this, which is a sharpener. You stick it down in there and sharpen it. So there's not an advantage to using that. You can use a mechanical pencil. You're all familiar with those. Click the button and advances. I'm not going to use one. I use them occasionally when I draw. Once you get going on this, if you want to switch up the tools, I would encourage you to try different tools. But I would say this, the tools will not make you a better artist. Now, the caveat there is sometimes we use cheap tools, you get cheap results. But I think if you're a beginner, pretty much all of your results are going to be, the tools won't make much of a difference. A good drawing pad will not change your art that much. Once you get going and you learn to control your pencil a little bit more, then that's when you want to start looking at, do I want to use a mechanical pencil? Do I want to use a lead holder? Do I want to use a harder lead or a softer lead and that sort of thing? I think at this point that's pretty irrelevant though. And if you're a little more advanced in this video, then maybe you already know the answer to that question. And this is really starting at ground level. So, okay, so we've got tools out of the way. Oh, for paper. This is what I'm going to draw these on. This is just a Strathmore sketchbook. Literally, this is just my sketchbook. I don't think the paper matters. What I would say is when you're beginning, you should use cheaper materials. You can spend a lot of money on paper. You can buy Bristol board that's $1 a piece, $1 a page. But the problem is when you do that, you're unwilling to make changes that maybe you need to change. And so I'd say starting out, use as cheap a paper as you can get. Now, certainly the paper will make a big difference in how you draw. I don't like drawing on soft paper. I like kind of a harder, thicker paper that's got a smoother surface. And again, that's something that when you learn to control the pencil, you'll develop a taste for it and what you want. But this is what I'm gonna work on. This is just my regular sketchbook that I carry. It's not the nicest paper, but it's a sketchbook. The great thing about a sketchbook like this that I probably spent $10 on is if I put a crappy drawing in it, I don't care. You know, I'm not worried. It's not precious. Sometimes I see artists that are just starting out, and somebody will give them a real nice leather sketchbook, and they're scared to draw in it. And don't do that. If you have a sketchbook, and I would encourage you to get a sketchbook, but if you have a sketchbook, you want to you want to draw on it. So don't get something that's so nice that you're scared you'll mess it up. Don't worry about that. In fact, I would encourage you when you get a sketchbook, if you feel that way, draw on the second page. I do that a lot. I'll draw on the second page and go in a couple pages, and then I'll go back and put something on the first page when I'm not as uptight about putting marks in my new sketchbook. Okay, so again, on this, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, this is literally like a glossary. It tells you what some of the things are. I won't go through this too much because this is literally like, that's a sound effect. It talks about speech balloons, that kind of stuff. This isn't super critical, I think, for learning. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about this because this is a little more important, I think, to learning to draw comics. And we will refer back to this particular section whenever we are talking about storytelling in comics. And storytelling in comics is probably the most important thing. Obviously, drawing is important, the drawing ability, but storytelling in comics is the ability to draw a sequence of pictures that tell the story. That's the most critical thing in drawing comics. Comics are not a series of pinups or illustrations. It's a story. And so if you can tell a story through a sequence of images that makes sense and that the reader can follow it as it goes through the page and as it goes on through the book, then that's your goal. That's what you want. And so I'm going to talk about that. But okay, so let me go through this real quick. Okay, so and some of these are very self-explanatory. And this language of storytelling comics, a lot of it comes out of the movie industry. And so if you know anything about movies and that sort of thing, you'll hear this. So okay, so this is in comics what they call a close-up shot. And it's basically close-up because it's close up to the figures or the characters. You can see it's just heads. It's a close-up shot. Now this is referred to as a medium shot. Now you see the whole figure and you don't see particularly their faces in detail, but you can see the action. This is a medium shot. Okay, now this is a long shot. And this is a long shot because you don't see the figures. They're in the car, presumably. You can see speech balloons. But this is used a lot of ways to set the setting on the scene. So so this typically a new page or a new story would start off with this kind of shot, and it basically tells you where the story takes place. For example, I don't know anything about this comic, but it takes place on the street. There's a bus stop there. There's some kind of older car. It's not New York City. I don't know exactly where it's at. Maybe some small town. Maybe in France, or that's a double decker bus. I bet it's Europe. I bet it's in England. So, this establishing shot, or this long shot, which is if it's the start of a scene, they call it an establishing shot. Here they call it a panoramic shot, but it establishes where the story's at. So that's the value of this. And so when you're telling your story, you don't want all this shot. You want some of this, and you want some of this. And even on each page, you may want some of this and some of this and some of this. But you'll need more than this to tell a story. So there's some other options that we have. Okay, this is what they're calling a bird's eye view, and this is very important in superhero comics, because a bird's eye view, your camera is in the air. It's like what a bird would see. For example, here we see the Human Torch, and he's looking down. You see it's the tops of the buildings. You see Namor coming up at him. That's a bird's eye view. Now this shot is a worm's eye view. Now the reason why is because it's basically shot from down here, and we'll talk about this when we get into the chapter on perspective. But this is basically a low angle, and this is good to show power and to show. This is good to show if you have a shot of like Doctor Doom. You may want to shoot. May want to draw it from a worm's eye view, because it tends to make the figures look more imposing, because they're kind of looking up on them. They tend to be bigger. Okay, so this is a silhouette. You don't see this a lot nowadays because the trend is to let the colorists do some of this. But this is basically this figure's in silhouette. Now the great thing about a silhouette shot is a silhouette shot. It is easy to read. You can tell what's going on there. Some kind of bat. It's flying past this building with a clock on it, and there's maybe like a village below or whatever. But it's quick to read. It can save you a little bit of time to draw them because it's just a silhouette. But also, the other thing is, you want to use these you want to alternate between all these. You want to use all these. A page may have every single one of these in it. It may have a bird's eye view that's also a close-up shot. This is a fairly close shot. It's not that version of a close-up. That's some books break this down. They would call that maybe a medium close-up. But think of a comic page as a music, as a song, and you don't have the same beat, 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 but it alternates. You have some guitars, you have some drums, you have the bass, you might have some keyboards, you might have the bagpipes, whatever. But that's what you want in a story. You want in your comic. You want to use these in an alternating order, And so I would even go so far, and I even go so far when I am writing out a script, or when I'm looking at reading a script to draw, I will make a note on there. I will do, close-up shot, down shot, worm's eye view, 3/4 view. I will write it out, and I will look at it and go, did I change everything up? Is my panel composed all of shots like this from that angle and that? If so, you need to mix it up. You want to do something that's a little more dynamic. Okay, that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, the secrets of form, making an object look real. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. If you've had any art classes, you may have talked about this. And they don't do a great job of explaining this in this book. But basically what it is every object that you encounter in life is basically composed of a few basic forms. A sphere, a cube, a cylinder, a rectangle. You might throw in a pyramid, maybe. But they're solid forms. So basically, instead of drawing, and I'm gonna pull another book here. This is a book called Drawing Dynamic Comics by an artist named Andy Smith. Andy did a bunch of comics in the 90s, and I think he wrote a How to Draw Comics column for Wizard magazine back in the day. And so Andy has a little bit to say about this, and I'm gonna steal from his, basically, because he shows a little bit better examples. He shows the sphere, and he shows how like a light bulb is made out of a sphere, and this pot is made out of a sphere. Like a cylinder, you get a coffee pot, you get a glass, you get a flashlight, and then over here, from a cube you get like a dishwasher, or I'm not a dishwasher, an oven, and you get a printer, you get a car, even you get a car out of this solid object. And so the idea is that you want to think, when you're drawing something, you don't want to just think about a circle or a cube or a square, but you want to think about it as a solid object. And I'm going to draw some examples of that. So for example, now, so a sphere is a little more difficult because it's round. So, a circle and a sphere look the same when you draw them, but maybe you draw some shading on it. So immediately it looks like, okay, that's a sphere. Okay, so a cylinder, we'll draw a cylinder. So a cylinder, and then when you're drawing, and I'm going to have you draw some of these, go ahead and do what they do call draw through. And what I mean by that is, this is my cylinder. Think of it as like a can. But instead of just leaving it closed, go ahead and draw that other side. Okay? So, and what I really want you to think about is drawing cubes. Okay, so that's a cube. But what I want is I want you to draw your cubes like this. So draw them as if they're clear. In other words, and they call that drawing through. And the reason why is because I don't want you to fake where they all come together. So when you make your cubes like this. We'll draw like the top. So you draw the top. Okay. And then you'll draw the vertical lines. So this one you can't see, right? But we're going to draw it. And then down here you'll draw. Okay. So then what I want you to do, and I want you to draw some of these, but I want you to draw them at different angles. Okay. So imagine like they're dice tumbling through space, and do the best you can to keep them where they look like they're square. So this line would be parallel with this line, and this line would be parallel with this line. So it should all come together like that. Okay. And do maybe a couple dozen of these, maybe a dozen of these, whatever you can take. Because I know these exercises tend to be kind of boring, but do whatever you think is good, whatever, and do, fill a page of them, and then do them, and don't draw don't draw through, draw them just like this, and use what you can see to figure out like where stuff is going. Okay, and I want you to draw them, or draw a bunch of them, like the solid ones. Solid forms, solid cubes, and again, draw them as square looking as you can. Try and keep them. That one got a little out of control on me, but okay. And then draw some of them like facing towards you, like that. Fill a page of these solid ones, and then what I think you need to do is, and I'll show you this in the book, and the book doesn't go through this super well, but it shows how stuff is made out of cylinders, and so here's an airplane. Now the problem with a lot of these drawing books is they'll show you, draw a cylinder, and then they'll show you make an airplane, and it's hard, I think, to get from there to there. Let me go through his book. Let me go through his chapter a little bit, and then we'll get back to the exercises. Okay, so here it's showing how the human being, the human form is composed out of a rectangle or I guess that's not a cube, but it's a solid rectangle, some cylinders. It's tapered. I don't know what that is. I read one drawing book and they referred to it as a pair of underpants, which I thought was funny. Now this is shading, and that's what I'm working up to. I want to get you to shade some of these. Okay, and then here's some examples of these forms. It's got examples from the comic. Here's this weird machine, and it's a cylinder, or it's a sphere, and some cylinders. Here's a car. This is the kind of thing that I think is difficult for beginners, because you see this, you kind of go, okay, that from there to there is quite a jump. This is a good example. This is a car that's wrecked, and this is just the basic shape for a car. And this is the Fantastic Four's flying car, and there's that basic shape. And there's some figures made out of shapes. And okay, that's the end of chapter 2. But so what I want you to do is you're going to work on cubes specifically. And I want you to draw a couple like this until you get to the feel of drawing them without that background. And then I want you to fill a page of these. And then what I want you to do is somewhere in there, anywhere, I don't care where, I want you to draw a sun. Just like a little kid would draw a sun. This is your light source. And then I want you to think about where this would hit this cube. So like here, it would hit it up here. So we're going to shade this. Okay. And maybe this one doesn't have as much shadow on it. So maybe you want to lighten up a little bit. And feel free to do like this if you want to do that. But make this one a little bit lighter, because it's kind of maybe there. So like this one, this side would be black. Well, this side would be facing the sun. Maybe this side you're like, well, it's kind of facing away, but it's not in the shade. So I'll make that one a little, like that. So like this one is in the shade. And this one, not so much. But I want you to fill a page of those. And that will give you an idea. It will get you to thinking in cubes. And then it will get you to think in terms of lighting the cube. Okay, so now you're going to do a page of these with your sun that are cubed. And you put as many as you want on that page. It's up to you how hard you're willing to work. But then what I'd like for you to do, and this is only for the advanced students, if you feel like this was all easy, then what I'd like for you to do is create some objects out of these shapes. It can be like that example of a gun out of cylinders, and a rectangle for the handle. And here's the thing, it can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. Just whatever you feel. Again, this is the advanced. Not everybody has to do this, but there was that car in there that was wrecked up against the thing, so it was a rectangle with a rectangle on top of it. You can draw through. You notice I'm drawing through on this stuff. It's kind of a stubby car, but you get the point. Make stuff. You can make it as simple or as complex as you want. Just whatever you feel like doing as far as that goes. One thing I would tell you about the cylinder. So a cylinder is like a rectangle, but it's round. It's like a can. Okay. That shape on the end is what they call an ellipse. An ellipse is a flattened circle, but it's like that. It's not a football shape. So it's not pointed. It's this. It's rounded. They make, I have one right here, these ellipse templates. Don't use one of these, but you can see all these This is for certain perspectives, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But these shapes are all, it's a smooth shape. It's not that. Okay. Anyway, okay, so that's chapter 1 and 2. This is lesson 1 of how to draw comics the Marvel way. Hopefully this is helpful. Again, you work through the exercise. If anybody does the exercise, let me know. And hopefully I'll see you next week. I'll start up with chapter 3. I don't even know what chapter 3 is over, but we'll get there. I think if we get through this, we'll all be better artists at the end of this. Again, I am Scott Sackett. If you enjoyed this, please take a second to subscribe. And thank you very much. And enjoy drawing it. And I'll see you later. Goodbye.